Welcome, SMSU art students. We are at Laker Nation and we are here in Lakeview. And today we are going to finish our Parfleche bag. So we're going to do how to sew attached embroidery patch to a Lakota Parfleche bag. And we are going to use the basic stitches and things that we had talked about before, where we use our basic sewing techniques. And we are going to sew with those basic techniques, and we are going to use... Today we did the dolphin or round stitch, or the straight stitch as it says there. We're going to learn how to do the zombie stitch, and then we're going to also do the blanket stitch. And as we do that, then we will be able to create, we've made our embroidered patch, and now we are going to attach it to our bag, and then we are going to sew our bag together. So that is the plan today. It's a good plan, and ready, get set, go. All right, I've got the materials I need. I'm going to need my phone for measuring. I'm going to also need the embroidered patch that I've made. And all my stitches and my tied knot should be on the back. I'm going to need some more embroidery thread. I'm going to need a needle with a large eye and with some thread attached. I'm going to need a scissors, and if you made a printed copy of this sheet, that would be awesome. I'm going to need 2 pieces of felt. You can get these at Walmart for 27 cents a piece. So I'm going to put this right here so you can see that. You could pause this, take a picture of it with your phone or whatever device you have. And then this is the backside with how the lessons go about. And we are going to get started. So first thing I'm going to do is I could use one color or I could use 2 colors. In this case, I'm going to take the blue. I'm going to put my phone right here so that I have some space on either side, and I'm going to draw myself a line. That line is going to be pretty similar to what's going to happen here. So now I'm going to take a scissors, and I'm going to cut this. And when I cut this, if I just cut it like this, I put it towards the back. But I found it easier if you fold it a little bit. It gets more pressure, and it seems to make an easier cut. So now once I have that piece cut, I can go back and trim it up and make sure it's nice and even. I'm going to take my pen and I'm going to draw my next piece that I'm going to cut right like that. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut this piece, and as I cut that, I now have my 2 pieces cut together, and I have made them. If I want to, I could go back and be more diligent about how I cut that and make sure that those are cut more evenly. Now, before I go and do anything, I'm going to decide where I want my embroidered patch. Do I want it like this, or do I want it like this? And I think it's going to fit better if I go like this. I'm going to start with it near the bottom, which is different than what I showed during our earlier lecture. I'm going to take my thread, which I have tied at the end. And if you don't remember that these 2 pieces right here are the rabbit ears. I take the 2 rabbit ears. The rabbit goes around the tree stump, which is my finger. It goes over the root, which is the other string, and it goes down through the hole, and then you pull it. I have that little quote sitting right here, tying a knot. The rabbit goes around the tree stump, over the root, and down through the hole. And then that way I make a knot. Now, I usually like to make 2 knots, put them close together, and that way I get a big, big knot, and it is good and golden. All right, so I'm going to start zombie stitch. Woohoo! Zombie stitch is the round stitch. It is exactly like the previous stitch, except that when I start it, I go through from the back. If the dolphin is going to come out of the water, and then when the dolphin goes back in, he goes in only into 1 layer. Now the dolphin goes back out of the water, and he goes through both layers, and then the dolphin goes into the water, and he only goes through 1 layer. And so what we're really trying to make is we're trying to make a stitch that looks like what the doctor would give you if you fell down and hit your head, or you got a big enough cut on your arm that required stitches or something of that nature. So this looks like a stitch that the doctor puts in. I call it the zombie stitch because I'm a big fan of Simon Pegg movies, and Shaun of the Dead is a movie, and his buddy becomes a zombie at the end of the movie. And while he is a zombie, things fall off of zombies because they are no longer living. And so he might have to sew his arm back on. And to sew his arm back on, he would use the zombie stitch to sew the arm back onto a zombie. And so what will happen is you just get this stitch that goes over, and the closer you put your stitch, the stronger the stitch will be. The farther apart and the bigger you make it, the less strong it will be. So a really good zombie stitch you hardly see. A poor zombie stitch is going to be one that goes over and you see big strands of it. Now, remember, needles are sharp. So if you are younger, be careful. You might poke yourself. And the worst case scenario, you're just going to poke yourself. It'll sting. It'll smart. But it is just a poke. It's not like you are the zombie and you've lost a limb and you're going to have to sew it back on. So as I go, I just continue to use this technique. Now, I have to sew this on first as opposed to sewing on it after I've attached my bag, because the reason why is I can't fit this into my bag. This makes it really hard once it's in the bag format. So this zombie stitch is going to go all the way around. I'm going to zombie stitch all the way around the outside. Okay. So now I'm going to take two other pieces because I have to finish this. And when I finish it, I need to be able to finish it for you as a demonstration. So I'm going to come back and I've cut two other colors that I have from the other day. And I'm going to put these together using blanket stitch. Now, this is going to be my bag proper. My phone should be able to fit inside it comfortably all the way. And then I should be able to fold over a top, and I could put a button here, or I could make a drawstring so that it fits together. All right, so what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to take my other thread that I've already sewn, tied a knot in so that you could see this. And I'm going to do the blanket stitch. Now, just to see, the zombie stitch ends up looking like this. And it's where you put a butt weld in welding, where you put two ends together and you weld them together. Well, a blanket stitch is similar, except it's going to go over and around, But every time I make a loop, I'm going to sew through the loop. So, yeah, that probably didn't make much sense. Now, I'm going to start my zombie stitch by going to the inside, or not my zombie stitch, but my blanket stitch. Got zombie on the brain. Now, this way I hide my, and I'm going to cut that off. And of course, just like my seasoned art professor used to say, if the demo goes correct, you've done something wrong. All right, so now I'm going to go over. I go from the back side. Notice how my thread went over. And then I'm going to pull, and then right at the end, you see that there's a loop. Now I'm going to go through the loop in the direction that I'm going, and I pull it tight. There's my first stitch. Now I can put this through. It goes through both layers. Again, you want your stitch to be close. I'm going to go through, and I pull it tight. And I should start to get a little line of material. Now I could switch directions, and I think I might do that here. I think I'm going to go, it's easier to see for you and easier for me to do. All right, I pulled that one a little tight. There's my loop. I pull that through, make that tight, and I'm going to do it again. This is my blanket stitch. Now, the round stitch or the straight stitch, or what we called the dolphin stitch, where the dolphin went through the water, out, and then back in, that stitch is a really important stitch because that's the basic stitch for everything that we do. It then also relates to, it's almost exactly the same stitch for zombie, but zombie just has a different look on the outside. Now, in art, I have a tendency not hiding the stitch material. I like the stitches and thread to be shown. I think it adds to the artistic quality of it. Now, as far as craftsmanship goes, it is not high craftsmanship because technically in sewing, you want to hide those stitches. So right now, I do it this way because then it helps me to see as I'm teaching. I teach this to third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders, and sixth graders. I usually try to do this at the same time right after Christmas. And this gives me this project when we meet once a week takes about 6 to 8 weeks to complete the Parfleche bag. And if we sew another project off of that, that could be another 6 to 8 weeks. And I'm well through third quarter and starting into fourth quarter. So it's a lengthy project. If I did it over in a class with older kids, high school kids, this project only takes about 2 days to 3 days. It just depends upon the kid. And so the sewing projects last longer for older kids, but for younger kids, it takes a while just the way the mechanics of the classroom are set up. But the biggest problem I have with the younger kids is that they will poke themselves. The second biggest problem is they can't thread their own needle. The third biggest problem is they have trouble tying a knot. So that's why we use the little mnemonic device about the rabbit, because that helps them to remember. And again, it's just a good handy skill that we can be practicing. And especially in this era of COVID-19 where we aren't getting out as much and we are alone, we might be repairing our own clothes. We might be doing things that occupy our time that are a little more old school. That's the one thing that we've known. People are starting to garden again. People are starting to do activities like this because they utilize time. They make time disappear. They don't hurt your eyes because you're not looking at a screen. And notice that once I get going, I can carry on a good conversation. There used to be clubs where women sewed or made baskets, or they made blankets, and they were sew parties. So even in the Lutheran Church, they called it Ladies' Aid, and it originally started with making quilts and things of that nature. And it was an opportunity for people to get together and sew and talk and converse. And the funny thing is that when you get a whole bunch of people doing this, it gets really quiet. That's when my classrooms are the quietest. And so this is the blanket stitch. It's a really simple stitch. It just goes back and forth. It goes through and then under. And it's a repetitive exercise. Remember I talked about making the R shift, shifting to the right side of your brain. This is one of those techniques that you can do that makes you make that shift. If you're not talking, you won't notice the passage of time and things will just go by really quickly. This is one of the things I do to choose to relax, to lower my high blood pressure. I don't know why I have high blood pressure, but okay, so I'm going to keep doing that stitch. Notice how tight mine is. It's really nice and tight, and I got a nice little line that goes down. It makes for a very strong stitch, doesn't pull apart very easily. I'm going to keep going all the way around until I get to here. And then I'll finish the knot off by only going through one layer, tying my knot, cutting it, and then it'll sit inside there, and that'll seal it. So after you embroider your embroidered patch on using zombie stitch, you will then take that piece and you will put that on your other piece and you will sew that on, attaching it in that manner. You should be able to make a nice little holder for your, and next week we're going to talk about how we're going to close that off with a patch on the back. That's going to be a strip of cloth like this. It's not going to be this thick, but it'll go on back. We'll sew it on in a light stitch, and then that will hold it in place. Or we're going to cut a series of holes and we're going to make a drawstring, and then that'll hold it in place, and it should be able to hold your phone. So it all depends upon the size of your phone and the material that you want to use. And that was basic sewing, which is a state requirement. State requires that all children learn about fabric arts, and that people that teach art have to be able to know and understand how to do fabric art. So we utilize hand sewing and stitching. We've also done some of that weaving where we wove with paper. And after this, I may even go through and show you how to do a looming exercise with a piece of cardboard and some yarn. But we'll talk about it. All right, there's lesson 1, how to make a embroidered patch, and then how to make a Lakota Parfleche bag. Remember the Lakota were people in western South Dakota, and the Dakota were people in Minnesota, and they used this as a way of carrying things like arrowheads and bowstrings and other materials that were essential to life on the prairie in pre-colonized America.